one story you won't see on any of the front pages, apart from the local newspapers, is the big press conference yesterday about the Manchester grooming gangs, and a launch of a report yesterday into what went wrong back in 2004 when detectives on the Greater Manchester Police launched Operation Augusta after the death of a 15-year-old girl called Victoria, who had told her carers before her death that she was being regularly raped and injected with heroin by an Asian man. Now, the probe was shelved just a year later, despite the fact that the force uncovered vast amounts of evidence of an ongoing sex grooming gang involving almost 100 paedophiles in Manchester, who later went on to rape and abuse dozens and dozens of young girls in the area. This was just in 2004. It wasn't decades ago. It wasn't a different time. And it's still happening now. We're seeing ongoing cases with grooming gangs across the country, whether it's Rochdale, Rotherham, Telford, Dewsbury, everywhere around the country. Those cases are now finally hitting the courts. But one of the people who has made sure that has happened is my next guest. Maggie Oliver is a former Greater Manchester Police detective, and she is the whistleblower for a huge number of these cases. And she was there at that press conference yesterday. Good morning to you, Maggie.
Good morning,
It is such a pleasure and an honour to meet you because of the work you've done. A lot of people perhaps would have first heard about you or seen you, image portrayed of you in that BBC drama Three Girls, which I think for a lot of people brought home what was actually going on in terms of these grooming gangs. Now, a lot of this has been politicised, and we're going to talk a lot about the origins of the men involved in the grooming gangs and the children and things like that. But yesterday was yet another report into yet another space of grooming going on by yet another gang in another city, where everyone, it would appear, in a position of authority, whether it was the police, social care, the local council, the care homes, they were all aware of what was going on. And they chose to do nothing about it. Can you explain to me and to people listening how on earth that happens in this country?
Julia, I can't even explain it to myself. You know, I've spent 15 years of my life fighting for the truth about this case from 15 years ago to be made public. So yesterday was a monumental day for me personally. It was a vindication of everything I have been saying. But I'm like a broken record. I keep saying the same thing, and I hear the same apologies trotted out.
And we saw yesterday, didn't we? We said the Chief of Metropolitan Police,
Absolutely.
how appalled he was. He wasn't there at the time. We had the Andy Burnham, the Greater Manchester Mayor, and this happens every time there's a new report. We're horrified, we're so sorry, it won't happen again.
Yeah. And actually what they say then is, this was 15 years ago. Things have changed. Well, I'm telling you, they have not. I have now set up my own foundation because I am inundated on a daily basis with stories and desperate letters and messages from people who are suffering right now.
And this is the key thing. So what happened in this case? A girl died. And it's only when there's a death when, oh, right, we're all going to have to sit up and pay notice, the authorities think. And she had already told her carers that she was basically being groomed by a man in the area, and he was injecting her with heroin and regularly raping her. And they, despite the fact that, and you were part of this investigation, weren't you? It wasn't like, we can't identify this man. We've got no idea who the other victims are. We've got no one to give a witness statement. We're going to have to close the case. Quite the opposite.
Yeah, I have to make clear that Victoria's death was not part of Operation Augusta.
Yes.
But I actually wrote the Operation Augusta report in 2004. And the reason that we put the photograph of Victoria at the front of that was because she had just died. Yeah. And she had been groomed. I didn't know grooming existed back then. It was my first introduction to this horrific crime.
Because often the people in authority were referring to these girls as well, you know, they were just
prostitutes,
and they were using some pretty pejorative terms about which I probably can't say on the radio at this time. Most of them beginning with SNL. But yeah, and these were their older boyfriends. These were 13-year-old girls with boyfriends in their 40s.
Yeah, and what has always shocked me is why there was only me shouting out about it.
Do you think it's because you're a woman? Do you think you felt it more? Because if my husband had been a detective, then he'd have looked at it and gone, this is wrong.
Absolutely. And you know what? The powers that be have tried to shut me down from day one. And the language that they have used to do that is that I am a woman who became too emotionally involved, that I'd lost the plot, that I was bereaved, misogynistic ideas and words intended to shoot the messenger, when those chief constables knew full well that I was telling the truth.
Yeah.
This report makes it very clear that we haven't had any more new evidence. The evidence was there in 2005.
And yet nothing was done.
And Operation Green Jacket has now been opened with the same evidence that we had back then. And I'll tell you that GMP have spent a full year battling to prevent this being published. Phase 2 is looking at the Rochdale case that I resigned over, and Rochdale Social Services are refusing to hand over any information in relation to that case. So the cover-up and the secrecy continues. And the question I have for every listener is, what is the real cost of all those lies? 15 years of lies. It's too late for these kids.
Yeah.
But what we need is accountability. We need criminal convictions of senior police officers who will be charged, in my opinion, with misconduct in a public office.
Because this isn't someone not sure. This
No.
isn't someone who wasn't aware of
mistake.
it. It's not negligence. They made conscious decision to close down, in a number of cases, investigations, or to not deliberately not start investigations so that they didn't have to prosecute. Okay, well, this is where we get to the crux of the matter, and this is where it's become very difficult politically to talk about it, and not just partly because in a lot of these cases also it's a party political issue,
I'll be
and
careful.
it's been the late, and it's been the late, and it's not, let's be honest, it's Labour councils, and there has been a particular issue. Now, do I think the Labour Party's got a bigger problem with this than the Tory Party? No, I don't. But there's clearly been a particular issue in these councils, and the key issue there has been, the accusation has been that we were constantly told, Asian grooming gangs. They are almost to a man Pakistani Muslim gang. They're not any other Asian.
They're not Japanese or Chinese.
They're Pakistani Muslim. They're coming from a particular culture, a particular background. And the claim that is being made is that they were able to continue their grooming of girls, white girls in the community. They viewed the white girls as disposable, as prostitutes. They didn't have any value to them, and it would appear that the investigations didn't go forward by the police, social care, the council, because there was concern about being seen to be racist or Islamophobic. Do you think that played a role? That it was because of their ethnicity and their religion that they weren't prosecuted?
I do think that was a big part of it. But, I mean, the report itself says that, it was very clear that we had evidence to prosecute these men. And I think political correctness was part of it. I also feel that these kids were viewed as an underclass, that they didn't matter. They weren't the chief constable's children. They were the children of families who were often from very difficult backgrounds.
Most of these children were in care, weren't they?
On Operation Augusta, yes, they were, Julia, but on Operation Span, no, they weren't.
But that's Rochdale.
And that's Rochdale. Well, they both